Welcome to SaaS Unscripted, a podcast by Noble Recruitment. I'm your host, Nick van Eten, and in this podcast we will take a look behind the scenes of the SaaS world. Join us on a growth journey through stories, challenges and achievements of the people driving this industry forward. Get ready for SaaS Unscripted. Hey, welcome to the show of SaaS Unscripted. We are following people from the SaaS industry and follow their personal and professional journey. Welcome to the show, Jelle. You have an incredible journey all the way up to the CEO of ValueBlue. And in today we are going to discover how you got there and all the personal and professional challenges that come to that.
Yes.
Is there anything I forgot? Who are you and what do you do?
My name is Jelle Visser. I'm the CEO with ValueBlue. I've been with the companies for close to 10 years, 9 and a little bit right now. I'm not the founder of the company. The company was founded in 2011 by my father, and back then we founded it as a consultancy firm. And over the years, I've been involved in the development and the commercialization of our product. And grew into different roles until I became the CEO in June this year. So that's quite fresh.
Yeah, congrats on that.
And of course, apart from that, I'm 31 years old now. I live in Dordrecht with my family, with my partner, and with 2 kids. A lot more to tell, but I think we'll cover that in the rest of the conversation.
Welcome. Looking forward to this. And we met a couple of years ago. Mm-hmm. I met you and your dad. And back then you had just raised your first funding round. And it's excited to see from the outside what your journey, how your journey has been since then. Mm-hmm. Before we go into the exciting SaaS stuff, can you tell us more about your youth? How did you grow up?
Yeah, I was born in Delft. And when I was very small, we moved to a place near Utrecht. I lived there for a few years. I went to elementary school, and then after that we moved again, and we moved to the place where my parents actually grew up. So that was in the northern part of the Netherlands, in a city called Enkhuizen. And I think I had a very good youth. Like, it was very protected. Didn't have to worry about a lot of things. I think the biggest impactful thing that happened was that we moved from one place to another, which is very big when you're 6, right? Like, then it's that's a whole different world. I remember very well that you're 100% sure that you're gonna see your old friends forever, and you're gonna come by every weekend when it's possible, and then you're a year in a new place and you don't see them anymore. But you very quickly get a new group of friends. So. Yeah, and then from there, I did all the way up to high school in Enkhuizen. And it was very good. Like, it's a small place, but big enough to have something to do. But I do very strongly remember that once I turned 14, 15, that I started to find it boring. And that I really wanted to move out. And I always told my parents, like, as soon as I turn 18, I move out of the house and I'm going to live in Amsterdam because I want a little bit more adventure than this. And that's what I did when I started studying.
Nice. And before you moved to Amsterdam, what did you have any jobs back then? What was your first job?
I was always taught that if you want to have money, you have to work for it. So the first jobs that I actually had, well, when I was pretty young, I used to do like all these little jobs around the neighborhood to make money, like drawing cards, cleaning up garages and stuff like that. But the first somewhat serious job that I got was, I think I must have been 13 or something like that. And well, there's a lot of farmland around that area. So I just worked on the farms. So I did all different things. So I worked with flower bulbs and having to clean them and stuff like that. I picked broccolis. I planted broccolis. Cauliflowers, like a lot of agricultural work. It was quite hard work, and also, like, I think nobody really liked it because it was like you had to get up really, really early. And I did that until 15, 16, something like that. But it earned, for that age, it earned quite well. And like it allowed you to buy or to do the stuff that you wanted to do. Then later on, I had jobs in supermarkets, which like was a little bit easier and you can plan your time a little bit more. And I think the first time that I started to do something a little bit for myself more is that I, together with a guy that I work with, we started a platform which we were basically reviewing music. So we started a website and we reviewed a little bit of like indie garage rock kind of music. And then out of that, we started DJing. So we would play the music that we were reviewing, and then we were going around the bars in the area. Well, and basically we made some money with that. It was not like a full-time job, but as a side job next to high school, it was pretty good actually.
And you basically escaped the the small village from the north to move to Amsterdam.
Yeah.
Can you tell us a little bit more about that time?
Had a small room in Diemen. I remember that when I got there, my parents came with me to look at it. My mother was like, "Why are you leaving our house to live in this little prison?" And she completely didn't understand. But for me, it was like a castle, like all for myself. It fitted a bed. I had a TV there. I had a PlayStation. I would go out every night. It was paradise for me for 2 years.
Living the dream.
Living the dream, exactly. When you start studying, a whole new world opens up, right? You learn things every day. You get to meet a lot of new people. I did a lot of completely different jobs. I remember that I worked for an Uber-like app that went bankrupt after that. But like I was on the central picking up the phone at night. So from 11 p.m. in the night till 7 a.m. in the morning, which was an interesting experience. I worked in a large hotel, luxury hotel, on the banqueting department, serving when like the football teams came to Amsterdam, like Real Madrid or like the Turkish squad, for example. They slept there and we had to service them, which was an interesting experience. But you learn like all these different kinds of businesses. Not really in mind back then to do something with it later, but they were definitely shaping experiences as well. And I think I was 2 years into my studies when one of my friends there said like, "Hey, I'm thinking about doing a minor." So we had to select a minor. And as usual, I was not super engaged. And I think it was like 8 weeks before we should start that I still didn't select anything. And he came up like, "Hey, I'm actually going to do something called entrepreneurship. And you have to build your own company during that studies. And that's the only assignment that you have to do." Well, to me, that sounded pretty cool. I was like, "Hey, I want to try that." So I enrolled myself and I got into the program. And it started off with like a week-long boot camp in a castle in Heemstede. And the thing that you had to do there is you had to form a group and you had to come up with an idea that could be a potential company. And then for the 6 months after that, you had to build that company. So you had to build it from the ground up. And I think that was the first moment that I realized, whoa, this is really the coolest thing that you can do. So we started that with a group of 4 people. I was one of the younger ones in there. So there were people with way more experiences that had a much more defined path of where they wanted to go. And I sort of came there and I don't like school. I'm not sure what I'm going to do here. But then I was one day into it and I thought, whoa, this is awesome. And that was the first moment that I realized, whoa, I really want to start a business because it's amazing.
Cool experience. And so that was a pivotal moment then?
That was a pivotal moment. So if there's one moment that really sparked my interest in that, it was that 1 week and what happened after there. That I think before that I knew it was a possibility to start a company, but I didn't really know where to start, or I was focused on like, you have to have like studies and you have to do, and then suddenly I realized, hey, you don't have to wait until you finish your study. You can just go ahead and do it. And that was really pivotal.
Cool. And yeah, very curious to know, what company did you build?
Yeah, so actually we started something that was called Snel Verzorgd, which is means something like quickly taken care of. And what we did is we put basically the stuff that you can buy in the supermarket in terms of care products. We put it in a box, and then you could take a subscription on it on a monthly basis, and we would send it to your home. And the idea behind it was that we as students always forgot to get to the supermarket. You didn't have like the delivery services back then. So why don't you get your toothpaste and your deodorant to your home every month so that you don't have to think about it? And we built stuff like a button to delay it for 1 month if you still had something left, or that you could get holiday packages and stuff like that. And that's how we started that off. We got it pretty far in 5 months. So we got like a working website. We got a way that you could order it. We could get the products. We had like merchandise and stuff like that around it, or branding. But we didn't make any real money with it yet. I think we sold 1 or 2 subscriptions, something like that. Well, we started a company. We rented a desk in a co-working space at the Overtoom here in Amsterdam. And actually, that's how it started. So we called it, after that, we renamed it to Groomsday, which we thought was a little bit cooler. And that business actually did pretty well at some point.
Cool to hear from you that you had some entrepreneurial experience before you kickstarted your journey in SaaS.
Yeah.
Yeah, you started with working for your dad at ValueBlue.
Yeah.
Can you tell us more about how you transitioned into finally the role as CEO of ValueBlue?
Then my father asked me, hey, we're actually starting with building a product. Can you have some experience with setting up these websites and the marketing engines and stuff like that? Can you help us with that? Well, and I said, well, that's okay. And I just, I got, I think, a 3-day contract in the beginning for 3 months, something like that, to help set up like the marketing department around the product. 3 months into the business, I realized that I really loved this B2B SaaS product kind of approach compared to the B2C businesses that I did before. I find it very challenging, like more mentally, cognitively challenging, right? You really have to think like, hey, what does the customer want? And how can we make sure that the product both does it, but also that you can tell that and explain that to the customer in the right way, which is difficult, right? Because you have to understand their business model, you have to understand how they do business, and then you have to map that to what you do. So started off with some marketing, and then I started adding to add some BDR work to it. Like we didn't have dedicated people for that back then. And then if I made an appointment, I started doing sales. And I think over the course of the 2-3 years after that, I sort of did all the commercially related roles around the product. So I did marketing, sales, I did pre-sales, did my own demos, learned to work with the product. And I found out that the field that we're in, which is enterprise architecture, is one of the most interesting things that I'd ever seen. And that really is how it kicked off. And then, from there, the product started to take off. So we started building the product back in 2014. We signed the first customers in 2015. The initial start of the product, so we started in 2011 as a consultancy business, and the people that were in consulting, they were building the product. So they were building it based on their real customer experience and the problems that they saw in the market. So we transitioned more and more of the consultants into the product organization, but it was a little bit of a combined business for 3 or 4 years. So around 2016, 17, 18, we started to realize more and more that the product might be the most feasible thing to chase for the coming years. So we saw more and more pull from the market. We saw that we could win from way bigger competitors, for example. So we really transitioned into a product company. But then we also started to realize that in order to pull that off, we're going to need external money. And that is when we did our first investment round with a company called VC called Newion. That must have been around the time that we met as well initially. And then when we got, by that time, the team had grown, right? So there was a dev team, we had the consultancy team that was transitioning into a customer success team. We had some other salespeople as well. And by then, I was already managing the sales team. And when the VC money came in, it was also a point where we had to officialize some of these things a little bit more. So up till then, I think we must have been 20, 30 people, something like that, of which a large share was the consulting business still. But that is also, I think we got that investment in May 2019. And then we also decided to do official titles. And then my official title became Chief Commercial Officer, basically responsible for commercial operations around the product. And that is what I've been doing for the 4 years since then until June this year. During that period, like, you learn a lot. So you're closely engaged with the funding rounds that we did after that. You're very closely engaged with all the other C-level team members. The team grew a lot. So currently we're a little bit over 100 people. So at some point you're managing 40, 50 people, and you get a layer in between. So very valuable experience, and also really, really on top of the growth of the company, of course. And then in June, I transitioned to the CEO role because my father is gonna stop. Also, we're preparing for another round potentially next year, and you don't want to do a CEO switch right before you do such a round. But you also want to make sure that when you do a round, that the current CEO can be in his position for another 3 to 5 years at least. So we had that discussion with my father and with our board members. And my father was pretty clear that he didn't want to go on for another 5 years. And that is when I transitioned into this position.
Interesting journey about having a side job at ValueBlue, the company your dad founded.
Yeah.
How does that work, working for your dad in such a high growth company?
I said, I'm really going to be here for 3 to 6 months. I'm going to help you to set up the website and some marketing engines, but that's it. And then after that, I'm going back to my studies and I'm going to do something for myself again. Well, that didn't turn out to go that way, obviously. You have someone to talk to and to ask questions to, which is really, really easy. I've never experienced it, but I can imagine when you get into a company when you're young, it takes a little bit of time to get acquainted with how a business works, what the field of work is, to gather all the knowledge. But I usually had somebody that owned the business that I could ask all the questions that I wanted on, even during Christmas dinner, for example, right? So you get a lot of exposure to the content, and that allows you to learn really, really quickly. At the same time, it's also your father and someone you know really good, so the communication style can sometimes be a little bit different, right? Like it's easier to be angry at your father than at your boss. And although he was my boss to a certain extent, like it was, you can have fights about little things or nagging, and of course things from your personal life can get into your business life a little bit, and the other way around. But I must say that we did it really good.
Would you also say interesting perspective for maybe other employees that worked for ValueBlue? Would you say you got more chances than anyone else in the business?
Difficult question. I would like to say no, and that we have always really tried to treat everyone equally, right? But to me, it feels a little bit like ignorant to say that I didn't get any additional chances, because in the end, like, he is my father, he knows me, and even when he might have objectively found that I did my job really good, I'm not sure if I would have gotten the exact same changes at any different random other company. So I definitely think that there's an additional benefit to being in the company of your father. At the same time, I'm pretty sure that I didn't get any promotions or jobs while I was not doing my job properly. So I always overperformed. I always made sure that I made my target just like the other people. So it's a little bit yes and no. So I think that getting the chances, and when I was doing it good, there was always a next step available. I think that is definitely a privilege. At the same time, it was not like, hey, you don't do anything, here you have a promotion, right? That's not how it works. You have to prove yourself as well, and maybe sometimes even a little bit harder than other people. I think the feedback that I was getting and the critique that I was getting was also very straightforward and direct, and I didn't get like 2 or 3 chances. It just had to be right first time.
You also mentioned something about your private life. You have a girlfriend and 2 kids, or
yes.
A wife and 2 kids. How are you keeping all those things together?
For me, the transition got harder when kids came into play, right? I got a kid during COVID, and my girlfriend already had a kid from an earlier relationship. So when all of that came together, suddenly you're going from a situation where you have 0 kids to having, well, the kids from an earlier relationship that really feels like my son, and then my own daughter, and you go to a situation where you have 2 kids waiting at home. And at that time, I was already traveling quite a lot, so I spent a lot of time in other countries, in the plane, traveling around. But then the dynamic really changes. So when I didn't have kids, I used to like work till 7, eat some food that I ordered behind my laptop, and could then go on till 10 in the evening. And suddenly I really started to value having dinner with the kids, for example. And that's something that you really have to balance. And I did definitely put into place certain things. So one of the things that I did, for example, is that I put in my agenda between 5:30 and 8, I'm having dinner and I'm bringing my kids to bed, and I'm completely fine working after that, no problem. I'm also completely fine working up till that moment really hard and like trying to do as much as possible in a short time frame. But as much as possible, I try to keep that time free and like be fully and being able to fully give attention to my kids during that period. And sometimes difficult, right? Especially when the pressure is high at work. Like it's very attractive to have your phone next to you during dinner and watch at the email come in and see if that deal is already coming in, or see if that big feature has been released, all those kinds of things. But I really try to put that away. Another thing that I try to do is that when I cannot make it home for one reason or another, I try to do as much work as possible in one day. So instead of spreading my work in like 5 10-hour work days, I'd rather do 3 8 or 9-hour work days and then 2 like 12-hour or 13-hour work days, really trying to fix as much work as I can, so that the other ones I have an evening free to spend with my family, for example. Well, those little tricks make it much more doable and give me the feeling that I have the availability to pay attention to my family, which I find very important. So I love the job and the business, but I love my kids and my partner more.
Yeah, now I summarize then your life basically, Jelle. You have quite some people that rely on you.
Mm-hmm.
You have multiple investors that you work with. You have around 100 people that rely on your management.
Mm-hmm.
You have a family life to support. Have there been times that it was just too much?
No. That's a very short answer is no. Not too much. There's been times that it's much.
Yeah.
But as I said before, I really enjoy the ride. Like I love the field of work that we're in. I love the whole idea of entrepreneurship and building a company. The pressure can sometimes get high. I've never been very sensitive for outside pressure, in the sense that I strongly hope that our investors are going to be very successful, because they're going to be successful if the company is successful. But to a certain extent, I'm not running the company for our investors. I'm running the company to build something amazing and to make the world a better place, and because I enjoy it. So I never feel like I'm working for them or I'm failing them. Like I do more feel like I'm failing myself if the company fails. For the people in the company, that's slightly different, right? Because you know that they're dependent, you know them really, really well, you build a relationship with them, and they are more dependent on our single company than investors are, for example. So you feel some kind of responsibility. At the same time, I always when I think too much about them, I also tell myself hey, we have amazing people in the company. They are super talented. In case I fail, they will find another job in 1 or 2 months, because they are smart enough and talented enough to work anywhere they want and to have a very good job. That doesn't mean that I would like to lose them, but it gives me a little bit of relief. Sometimes it's really good to zoom out a little bit and understand hey, if I somehow fail them and I cannot sustain the company, it doesn't mean that they will not have food on the table the next day. Probably means that they will be disappointed. It probably means that they have to look for another job and go through a slightly rough time, but then in 1 or 2 months they will find an amazing other job and they can do it. And that zooming out, putting things in perspective really helps me. And I think that is also where you really have to sometimes take a little break and zoom out a little bit, because those are the exact things that you can get into those loopholes. If you keep on working, making late nights, don't sleep enough, then you can feel that pressure way more than when you have had a great night and you have been doing something relaxing, and then suddenly you realize, okay, of course there's pressure, but in the end, I'm just a human and I can fail and the people will survive, like that can help.
And that's how you solved a situation like that. But do you also have a specific situation, a challenging situation, and how you navigated that?
Yes, so I think my most challenging times are a little mostly FOMO. Like you feel like you're in this great position to succeed as a company, but then suddenly it can happen that one of your big customers is close to churning or leaving you, or it can happen that you see a competitor that gets a massive investment and you say like, how are we ever going to compete with that? Or you see them releasing this feature and you think, why didn't we think of having that first? Those kinds of things. Or your star employee walks away, like those things can happen, right? And that then you really feel like, it can only get downhill from here. And those are the things that keep me most awake at night. So it's less a general feeling of pressure, but it can be these moments. And especially, for example, when that happens, like you get that on your email or you see it on LinkedIn right before you go to bed, that can be really, really bad for your nights of sleep. And I can wake up in 4 in the night and then I cannot sleep anymore. And like you get into that loophole again. So there's a few things that I try to do there. So first of all, there's a moment in the evening when I turn off devices and try not to look as much as possible. Usually after 10 p.m. I don't like to look at anything anymore, and if possible a little bit earlier, and then at least give myself like half an hour to an hour to sort of rewind and like do something completely different. Doesn't matter if it's reading a book, playing a game of FIFA on the PlayStation, something like that makes your mind empty. And there's also occasions when you just have to talk to people, like if it's bigger than just unwinding. I like my partner is a great help there, for example. I really believe that is important. But sometimes when I really struggle with something, I just try to explain to her what the situation is and ask her like, how would you approach this, or how would you do this? And I really believe that it's not about expecting her to give me the solution or on how to run the business, but the fact that you can talk to someone and that you can ask that question. And usually even by explaining it to someone, like from a more external perspective, you get better ideas yourself as well. And also like it sort of gets out of your system by putting it out there in the open. And the nice thing about doing that with your partner, or in some cases with my father, that would also really help, right? Because he could even understand it a little bit better. That can be very relieving, and it can be hard to do that within your company or with your investors, because you know that they have a stake in it, right? So you cannot be completely transparent sometimes about the doubts that you have with somebody that you work with. So having people around you that are completely that don't give a shit about how the business is doing to a certain extent, that don't give a shit about how you feel about that thing, and that can just give you an honest answer where you can explain everything in like a protected space. I think that is very important for me to sort of get over those big challenges.
Yeah, I can imagine. And also, as a CEO, you're a leader. You're the leader of 100 people that rely on you. You had a fresh perspective how you can zoom out. But do you have an example how you really led the business with purpose?
Well, I would say that one of the first things that I did as when I became CEO is we used to be a quite sales-oriented organization, which to an extent makes sense. But for example, in our OKRs, I don't like to have financial metrics in there. So I believe that it's very important to talk more about the purpose that you have as a company. What are we trying to achieve? How are we going to do that? And so one of the things that we're now doing is that we're having much more customer success oriented way to objectives, that's really like purpose driven. In the end, we need to make money to get to that purpose. So in the end, revenue growth will be part of achieving that objective. But by not calling it the money goal, not saying like, hey, we want to go to 10 million or to 12 million as your goal, that is a way to get to your purpose. So that's a change that I made. Another thing that I introduced even before I was CEO is we give a share of the revenue that we generate. We give it away to a charity. And that's something that I always found really important. I think if your company is becoming successful, you can make a very big impact on changing certain things. And you're in a very privileged position. And in my opinion, you should use that. So one of the things that we do is we do 1% of the quarterly revenue, and 50 cents for every marketing qualified lead that we generate. We add that into a pot. And then one team added per quarter, they get to provide 3 charities of their choice related to the name of the release. So our product is called Blue Dolphin. So the releases that we do, they have the names of dolphin, like can be the Atlantic dolphin or something like that. And then you have to make a story about how that charity relates back to that dolphin. But it can be completely crazy. Like it can be 20 puzzle pieces tied together. And in the end, like last quarter, we gave it to the Youth Education Fund, for example, which has absolutely nothing to do with dolphins, but it was a great story how we tied it back. That doesn't matter. And then the whole company gets to vote, and we select one of those 3 charities. And I really love to give the people in the company the opportunity to give a part of the money that we make to something that they care about, right? And I also really like, especially when we do these smaller funds, it can make a very, very big difference. Half a year ago or something like that, we transferred the money to a very small local charity in South America that was doing work to educate tribes around a river where a certain type of dolphins swam. They don't get that many donations, so they got like 7,000 or 8,000 euros at once. And they sent us a video back with the guy, like the wildlife guy, recorded what he was going to do with the money and how he was going to educate the people living next to the river. I think like if you can do something like that, that's amazing, right? That for me really feels like purpose. You're trying to make the world a slightly better place. And it makes people feel good and it makes people engaged. We don't use it for marketing or anything. I think this is the first time I tell about it in a public place because I don't want it to become like a marketing tool. Look at us doing good. It's much more fun. If it's an internal thing that the people in the company like, and it gives me and them a good feeling.
And what fascinates you most about being part of the SaaS industry?
What I really love about SaaS in general is that compared to the old world where you would have like perpetual, you're much more aligned with your customer, right? Because with perpetual, it was very, it could be very profitable to do amazing sales and promise all sorts of stuff that you could not deliver. And then you sell the software and like the customer is stuck with it for multiple years. While in the SaaS business, you're running monthly or yearly contracts. So if you don't deliver the value, customer just quits. So you have to make sure that your customer is happy. It's way more fun to work with customers where it's beneficial to both sides and that you have a healthy, beneficial partnership. So that alignment of value between customer and vendor, that is something that I really love about SaaS, and it fascinates me. Another thing is the speed. Like, I love it when things go fast. I would say that I get bored quite quickly. Not one day is the same as the other. It's all about growth, and you have to change your business constantly. And that whole idea of constant innovation and change, that really attracts me.
Yeah,
I think standing still is a waste of time.
What would your advice be for someone that is new to the SaaS world or sees your career and wants something similar?
Well, my first and by far most important advice would be go into a business that honestly interests you. Like, don't start selling software because you think it's cool, or just because you want to go in sales. Don't start to do coding just because you love coding. Like, that's fine. But also make sure that you start working for a product and a team and a vision that you really believe in. Because in the long run, that's really going to make the difference, right? You can do sales anywhere. But if you have a passion for what you sell, that is great. And the same way, if you're in engineering, like you can code anything, but if you're building something, you nearly everyone needs to feel a little bit like a product owner, in my opinion. Like you really need to feel like it's your responsibility that you're selling your customers something awesome. I think that would be my advice. Like truly feel for the solution you're selling, and don't just go for the highest salary or the coolest job title.
And any tips how to get promotion after promotion like you did?
First of all, do your core job first. I think that is really important. If you're not making your targets, if you're not writing your code, if you're not finishing your plannings, that is the first thing that people look at, right? Your hard numbers have to be right. If they are not right, it's really hard to get a promotion. And sometimes you hear people, yeah, but I'm doing all these extra things. And I'm helping that person, It's all great, but it's only great if you finish your own job first. And then, of course, from that, like getting these promotions is also showing that you're willing to put in the work to solve problems. One of the most important feats that I look for in someone that we promote, and I think that's also something that I always used to do, is it's not about spotting a problem, it's about solving the problem. And there's a lot of people that can spot what goes wrong. Like they can flag, hey, we have to improve this, and this. And the next question is, how can you do that? And when are you going to start, right? Why didn't you solve it yet? And flagging problems, I've noted that a lot of people can flag problems and they can see what goes wrong. But there's really few people that also know what the solution is to solve it and implement it. Like that is really how you stand out for a company.
And what skill are you now flagging?
Yeah, it's a competence or a skill. It's proactiveness. That's definitely so, taking responsibility. So one of our core values is that you really have to, we want you to take full responsibility for what you're doing. Like if something fails, it's not the fault of the customer. It's not the fault of your colleague that didn't solve the problem. It's your responsibility. So start solving it. And I think that proactiveness, responsibility, growth mindset is also what people can call it. That is really important. And it's quite a rare skill, I also have seen. It's people find it hard to do that.
And how do you assess that in the hiring process?
It's really hard to assess because everyone will say that they will do it. Very few people will actually do it. But there's like, of course, you ask about previous experiences, right? One of the things that I really like to look for in profiles, for example, is people that have had promotions at the companies they were at before. It's something you just ask people, like, hey, if you would know this problem in the organization, whose responsibility is to solve it? I always like it when they say it's mine. And it's also, it's combination, right? Having a strong purpose, having a strong mission, and then also finding the people that believe in that purpose and that mission, because not everyone believes in the same purpose or the same mission. Like,
and what's your vision on your future vision?
So, first of all, I think it's really important that transformation, what we work on, that companies get better at it. So the total spend on transformation projects in 2023 is projected to be $2 trillion in 2023. So it's huge. Like every company has to do it. So there's a lot of projects. And there's been multiple parties like IDC and McKinsey that did research on this. But 70% of those projects run out of budget and time. And I think everyone that works in a company and that has worked on a project knows that the amount of times that you actually deliver it on the due date with the budget that you got for it, like it's rare. It more often doesn't happen than it does happen. And on top of that, what you also see is that most of those projects, once they're finished, they don't deliver the value that was expected upfront, or they don't bring the cost reductions. Well, to me, that is not just a business problem, but that means that every time we're trying to achieve that, well, I think here in Amsterdam we have the North-South line, which is a beautiful example of something that was supposed to be finished quite early, but then took 15 years longer to expect it. It's not just a problem for like the government, but people are dependent on that, right? A lot of people depend on public transport to get to their jobs, to get to their kids, to get to their family. And by having that line finished now, we allow for a lot of beautiful things. Grandparents getting to their kids easier, people getting to their jobs easier, allowing them to spend more time with their kids. And I believe that if we as a company can allow companies to be much more realistic in that planning, if we can accelerate those projects and make them make it better possible to do that on time and on planning, we can make for a much better world. And that is really what I want to get to. And right now, in the Netherlands, we are quite successful. So we have a little bit over 200 customers here in the Netherlands. We are one of the biggest players here. We're helping government organizations. We help large construction companies. We help hospitals. Well, I think you can imagine that in those industries, doing projects on time does not only make those companies more successful, but it saves lives and it makes people do better things, and we're able to help people better. And I would love to do that all over the world. So our first focus right now is to make that same impact that we have in the Netherlands in the US. And once we get it done there, they sometimes say once you make it there, you can make it anywhere. So from there, we can expand worldwide. And I think the end goal should be no project running out of budget and time, and expecting exactly the expected value for any company in the world ever. If we achieve that, we're done. So I think we have at least 50 more years to go. But
No, but I cannot have a better ending to our conversation than that. There's a beautiful way to summarize your vision for both your personal journey and the company's journey, Jelle. So thanks a lot sharing everything. We touched a lot of subjects, basically how your youth transitioned you into entrepreneurship, how entrepreneurship transitioned you into ValueBlue, and how ValueBlue was the vehicle to becoming the CEO of that international SaaS company. Is there anything that you want to share with the listeners after the story?
Well, first of all, thank you, Nick. I really enjoyed the conversation as well. And I think I want to get back to what we talked about. So if you're listening to this and if you're interested in a career in SaaS, like start doing it, number one, and do something that you truly believe in and that you love. And if the transformation business is something that you believe in, feel free to reach out because we can use some people. Perfect.
It's been an incredible journey of discovery today, Jelle. Thanks a lot for being part of SaaS Unscripted. Thanks for joining us on SaaS Unscripted. To explore the latest career opportunities, visit our website noblerecruitment.com. And don't forget to subscribe and leave your review on your favorite podcast app. Until next time on SaaS Unscripted.